all of our viewers navigate tax season is America's accountant, Geltrude and Company founder Dan Geltrude. All right, Dan. Our favorite subject, certainly for you. What's the first thing that a tax filer should do? Obviously, there are a million things, but what's the very first thing you tell them?
Well, the first thing I'm going to tell everybody out there is to make sure your accountant is still practicing. Now, why do I say that? It's because there's a shortage of accountants. There's 300,000 less accountants than there were just 2 years ago, Ashley. So what does that mean? You don't know if you have a tax preparer. So that's the first step. Now, besides that one is you need to get all of your information organized, because that's the key. When you don't have all of your stuff together properly, you miss something. And then when you don't have that information, guess what? You get a little love note from the IRS saying, hey, perhaps you didn't declare all your income. So that's really important to make sure that you are ready to have your tax return prepared.
Very good advice. So what are the most significant rule changes, Dan, from last year that people should be aware of?
Well, there's not a lot of changes, but you do have some out there. First and foremost, the tax brackets have changed a little bit. The standard deduction has changed. Also, the $300 charitable contribution, that's gone away this year. And then the child care credit. That is much smaller than it had been. So what's going to happen there is you may not realize that when you file your return this year, that refund is not going to be as large because of that change, both to the child and dependent tax credit.
This is an interesting question too, Dan. How should taxpayers handle reporting general welfare or related to general welfare? That would be disaster relief or the Inflation Reduction Act. How should taxpayers handle that?
Well, you have to look very carefully because some things are taxable and some are not. So again, this always goes back to, do you think you're getting a refund or are you going to owe? So without knowing these little details, you could be in for a surprise, and not a good one, meaning that instead of a refund, well, now you're sending money to our friends in Washington, which nobody wants to do.
Oh. They truly don't. Believe me, we know that. Now, listen, a lot of people have moved, and I know these issues have probably been dealt with in previous filing seasons, but people do continue to move, and that can get tricky, can't it? Because depending where you are, the tax code could be a lot more beneficial to you, but your previous state may come after you, right?
Oh, absolutely. So these high tax states, they don't like to see their people moving over to Texas and Florida, these either no tax states or low tax states. So you may very well end up being audited to make sure you have actually changed your state of residency. And if you don't meet all the requirements of the state you just left, guess what? They're going to pull you back in and say, you owe us tax. So you really need to be careful when you're moving state to state as to what the state you're leaving from, what's their rules as far as you owe us money.
Wow. Yeah, I know. When it comes to that, they are going to be merciless to track you down. So what are the biggest mistakes that people make, Dan, in your experience?
Well, it's not disclosing all the information to their preparer. Like, for example, you have people that change their marital status and you don't tell, and that could be getting divorced or getting married. They don't disclose that. Also, they don't track all their charitable contributions. If you are itemizing your deductions, you want to make sure you're getting the benefit of that. Also, student loan interest, you can get up to $2,500 as a deduction. So don't miss out on that. And then moving expenses, well, you have to be active in the military. So if you get moved and you meet the requirements, then you can get a tax deduction for that. And certainly we want our military people to make sure they get everything they can.
Yes, we do. Wow, we covered a lot of ground. That was great stuff. Dan Geltrude, thank you so much for your tax tips. Much appreciated, Dan. Thank you very much. All right, now let's take a look at some of